I had committed exactly $87,400 to my son's wedding, a number I knew by heart because I was paying for every single cent of it. I am a widow, 62 years old, and after 35 years of managing a mid-sized logistics company, alongside my late husband, I know the value of a dollar. More importantly, I know the value of respect. That Sunday afternoon, the respect in my home was nowhere to be found. I stood by the island in my own kitchen holding a cup of black coffee, watching my son's fiancée, Jessica, empty my pantry shelves. She had taken it upon herself to reorganize my spices and dry goods, because according to her, my system was archaic and visually chaotic. "You really should switch to uniform glass jars, Ella," Jessica instructed, tossing a half-full tin of paprika into my trash can. "It elevates the space. Right now, this kitchen feels like a thrift store." I glanced at my son, David. He sat at the breakfast nook, scrolling through his phone, completely absorbed. He was 30 years old, a software developer who made a decent living. Yet he seemed to shrink whenever Jessica took over a room. "I like my kitchen exactly how it is, Jessica." I replied, my voice perfectly level. I stepped forward, retrieved the paprika from the bin, and set it on the counter. "Please put the rest of my groceries back." She paused, offering me a tight, condescending smile. "I'm just trying to help you modernize. Since we'll be hosting the rehearsal dinner here, I need the house to reflect our aesthetic. I was actually thinking we should repaint these cabinets before November." Our aesthetic. In my house. I looked at David again. "David, your fiancé is throwing away my groceries." He barely glanced up. "Mom just let her do her thing. She has a great eye for design. It's not worth arguing about." I took a slow sip of my coffee. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply observed the two of them. Jessica continued pulling boxes onto the counter, humming a tune, clearly thrilled by her own authority. I realized then that I wasn't a mother to them anymore. I was simply an open checkbook and a free venue. "Leave the pantry alone," I stated, setting my mug down with a sharp clink. "Both of you, it's time to head home." Jessica huffed, dropping a box of pasta. "Honestly, Ella, you are so resistant to growth." They left. 10 minutes later, the house fell quiet, but the air felt heavy. I didn't know it yet, but the breaking point was only an hour away. I spent the next hour putting my pantry back together. There is a certain kind of meditation in placing things exactly where they belong. The flour on the bottom shelf, the spices on the rack, restoring order. My phone vibrated on the counter just as I wiped down the granite island. It was a text message from David. I opened it expecting a half-hearted apology for the afternoon's tension. Instead, I read a paragraph that made the blood in my veins run cold. "Mom, Jessica is really upset. She feels totally disrespected in your house. She's putting a lot of work into making our wedding perfect, and you're just throwing up roadblocks and being stubborn. She's the woman I'm going to marry. Accept her completely and stop questioning her decisions, or we're done with you. I won't let you ruin this." I read the message twice. "Accept her completely, or we're done with you." There was no confusion in his words. It was an ultimatum, clear as day. A demand for absolute submission funded by my own bank account. A younger version of myself might have panicked. A younger Ella might have called him immediately, weeping, begging to smooth things over, terrified of losing her only child. But I am not that woman. I set the phone down and looked around my quiet, immaculate kitchen. I thought about the 87,400 and I thought about the custom floral arches, the 5-course plated dinner, the string quartet, and the open bar. I thought about the way Jessica spoke to me and the way David let her. I picked up my phone. My fingers didn't tremble. I typed out a single, precise response. perfect. Pay for it all yourselves. I hit send. Then I turned off my phone, walked into my home office, and opened the bottom drawer of my mahogany filing cabinet. I pulled out the thick leather-bound wedding binder. It held every contract, every receipt, and every vendor agreement. I carried it to the dining room table, spread it open under the chandelier, and reached for a red pen. If they were done with me, then my financial obligations were done with them. Monday morning arrived crisp and bright. I woke up at 6, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat back down at the dining room table. The wedding binder was exactly where I had left it. I didn't need a lawyer. I didn't need a complex legal strategy. I simply needed the power of my own signature. Every single contract inside that binder, the country club, the florist, the caterer, the photographer, was signed by Ella Reynolds. Every deposit had been paid from my personal checking account. I was the client. At exactly 9 o'clock, I made the first call. Highland Oaks Country Club. This is Sarah, the cheerful voice answered. Good morning, Sarah. This is Ella Reynolds. I need to cancel the venue reservation for November 12th. There was a brief pause. The professional warmth dialed back just a fraction. Oh, Mrs. Reynolds, I'm so sorry to hear that. Let me pull up your file. Are you looking to postpone, or is this a full cancellation? A full cancellation. I confirmed. I am aware of the contract terms. I understand I forfeit the initial $5,000 deposit, but I am canceling before the 90-day window, which means the remaining $22,000 is absolved. That is correct, Sarah noted, typing rapidly. I will process the cancellation immediately and send a confirmation to your email. I crossed the venue off my list with a thick red line. Next was the caterer. The owner, a man named Thomas, was disappointed but professional. Since we were still months out, he refunded my deposit minus a small administrative fee. The florist was relieved. She had another bride begging for that same weekend. By 11 o'clock, I had systematically dismantled an $87,400 wedding. I lost roughly $8,000 in non-refundable deposits. I considered it a very reasonable fee for my freedom. I checked my email, printing out every single cancellation confirmation. I stacked them neatly inside a fresh manila folder. I felt no regret. I felt no sadness. As I listened to the quiet hum of my refrigerator, the only emotion running through my chest was profound, undeniable relief. I had stopped building a house on a poisoned foundation. With the vendors handled, there was one final financial tie left to sever. 3 months ago, Jessica had complained that managing the small day-to-day wedding expenses, like postage favors and beauty trials, was overwhelming her personal budget. David had asked me to help. Foolishly, I had walked into my bank and opened a joint checking account listing David and Jessica as authorized users. I deposited $15,000 into it, meant strictly for wedding incidentals. I gathered my purse and keys and drove to the local bank branch. I sat across from the branch manager, a polite man named Greg. I need to close this joint account and transfer the remaining balance back into my primary savings. I instructed, sliding my ID across the desk. Greg pulled up the account. He frowned slightly. Certainly, Mrs. Reynolds, though it looks like the current balance is down to just over $1,200. I blinked. Excuse me. There should be at least $13,000 in there. The invitations haven't even been mailed yet. Greg turned his monitor so I could see the screen. I put on my reading glasses. The ledger was a waterfall of transactions. Sephora, Nordstrom, a luxury day spa in the city, a lease down payment for a new SUV. They hadn't used the money for wedding postage. Jessica had been treating my gift like a personal slush fund. David either knew and allowed it, or he was too blind to notice. Close it, I commanded, my voice dropping an octave. close the account right now. Move the $1,200 to my savings. Right away. Greg nodded, sensing my shift in demeanor. I walked out of the bank with a cashier's receipt in my pocket. The reality of the situation settled over me like a heavy coat. They hadn't just been ungrateful. They had been actively exploiting me. The text message from David the day before wasn't just about protecting his fiancée's feelings. It was about protecting her access to my money. I got into my car, gripped the steering wheel, and took a deep breath. I was done being their safety net. It was time to secure my actual borders. Jessica had a key to my house. I had given it to her when they first got engaged, a gesture of welcoming her into the family. Over the past few months, she had abused that privilege completely. She would let herself in while I was out running errands, turning my spare bedroom into a chaotic storage unit for wedding supplies, decorative signage, and online shopping boxes. I drove straight from the bank to the hardware store. I didn't bother hiring a locksmith. My late husband had taught me how to swap out deadbolts years ago. I bought 2 heavy-duty brass lock sets, drove home, and spent the next 45 minutes with a screwdriver removing the old hardware and installing the new. When the front and back doors were secured, I tested the keys. The locks turned with a solid, satisfying click. Next, I walked upstairs to the spare bedroom. The room was practically vibrating with Jessica's presence. Piles of toolboxes, of custom napkins, and towering stacks of bridesmaid gifts covered my antique guest bed. I found heavy-duty trash bags and moving boxes in the garage and brought them upstairs. I packed everything. I didn't fold anything carefully, but I didn't ruin anything either. I simply swept her belongings into the boxes, taped them shut, and dragged them down the stairs. I carried every single box out to the front porch, stacking them neatly against the brick wall out of the weather. I walked back inside, locked the new deadbolt, and made myself a cup of tea. It was 4:30 p.m. I knew David and Jessica usually finished work around 5. Given my text from the previous day and the fact that Jessica's debit card tied to the closed joint account would inevitably decline the next time she tried to buy a latte, I knew they would be coming. I sat in my armchair by the front window, sipped my tea, and waited. At 5:15 p.m., David's car jerked into my driveway, stopping at an aggressive angle. Jessica threw her door open before the engine even cut off. She stomped up the front walkway, clutching her purse. David trailed a few steps behind her, looking flushed and panicked. Jessica marched straight up the steps, ignored the mountain of boxes, and shoved her key into the front door. It didn't turn. She rattled the knob. She yanked the key out, checked it, and shoved it back in, forcing it with her shoulder. Nothing happened. "Ella!" Jessica shrieked, pounding her fist against the heavy oak door. "Ella, open this door right now." I set my teacup down, stood up, and smoothed my slacks. I walked into the foyer and opened the door, leaving the heavy brass chain engaged. I looked at them through the 6-inch gap. "What is going on?" Jessica demanded, her face red. "My card was declined at the salon. And what are all my things doing on the porch?" "Your card was declined because I closed the account," I answered evenly. "And your things are on the porch because you no longer have access to my home. The locks are changed." David pushed forward. "Mom, what the hell are you doing? Have you lost your mind?" "My mind is perfectly clear, David," I replied. "You sent me a text yesterday. You told me to accept her completely, or you were done with me. I chose the latter. I accepted your terms." "You closed the wedding account," Jessica yelled, her voice echoing off the brick. "How are we supposed to pay the final deposit for the country club on Friday?" "You aren't," I stated. "I canceled the country club. I canceled the florist. I canceled the caterer. All contracts were in my name, so I dissolved them." The silence that followed was absolute. Jessica's jaw actually dropped. David stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "You canceled my wedding?" Jessica finally whispered, the fury bubbling up. "You can't do that." "I canceled my financial obligations," I corrected her gently. "I told you yesterday. Pay for it yourselves. Now please take your boxes off my porch." I closed the door, unbothered by the screaming that erupted seconds later. For the next 20 minutes, they stayed on the porch. Jessica yelled, pounded on the door, and demanded I come back out to fix this. I didn't engage. I sat in my living room with a book. Eventually, I heard the sound of packing tape ripping and boxes being shoved into the trunk of David's car. The tires screeched as they backed out of the driveway. By Wednesday, the flying monkeys began to circle. My sister-in-law, Martha, called me at noon. "Ella, what on earth is happening?" she demanded the moment I answered. "David called his uncle in tears. He said you canceled the entire wedding out of spite because you don't like Jessica's taste in kitchen decor." I chuckled softly. It was amazing how quickly a narrative could be twisted. "I canceled the wedding, Martha, because David told me in writing that if I didn't submit to Jessica's every whim, I was cut out of their lives," I explained smoothly. I simply took him at his word and removed my $87,000 from the equation. 87! Martha choked on the number. "Wait, they aren't paying for any of it." "Not a dime," I said. "And Jessica spent $12,000 of wedding funds on spa days and a car lease. So if you and Uncle Robert feel strongly that the wedding should proceed, I can send you the vendor list. You are welcome to fund it." "Oh," Martha said, her tone shifting immediately. "Well, that's a lot of money. I didn't realize." "Most people don't," I replied. "Enjoy your week, Martha." I hung up. I blocked Jessica's number entirely. I left David's unblocked, but I muted his notifications. I spent the rest of the week painting the spare bedroom a lovely, calming sage green. I bought a new reading chair and placed it where Jessica's boxes of tulle used to sit. I felt no guilt. I had drawn a boundary, and for the first time in a year, my home felt like mine again. A month passed. I didn't hear from David, and I didn't reach out. I focused on my garden, attended my weekly book club, and took a weekend trip to a bed and breakfast in the mountains. It was during that trip that I ran into Gemma, an old college friend of Jessica's who had been slated to be a bridesmaid. We bumped into each other at a local antique shop. She looked uncomfortable at first, but after some polite small talk, she sighed and set down a ceramic vase. "Mrs. Reynolds, I heard what happened with the wedding," Gemma said quietly. "I just want you to know." "I don't blame you." I offered a polite nod. "Thank you, Gemma. It was an unfortunate situation." "You don't know the half of it," she muttered, looking around the empty aisle. "Jessica is drowning in debt. She has maxed out 3 credit cards. The only reason she was pushing for such a lavish, expensive wedding was because she wanted the cash gifts to pay off her personal loans. She bragged to us that once she was married, David's income would wipe her slate clean. I stood perfectly still. The puzzle pieces snapped together. The desperate grasp for control of my funds. The car lease. The rage when the accounts were closed. She hadn't just been a bridezilla. She had been looking for a financial bailout, and I was supposed to be the bank. "Does David know?" I asked. Gemma grimaced. "He does now." When the vendors were canceled, she demanded he take out a personal loan to cover the costs, so she wouldn't look foolish in front of her friends. When he saw her credit report to apply for the loan, everything blew up. I thanked Gemma for her honesty and walked back to my car. I didn't feel smug. I just felt a profound sense of validation. I hadn't acted out of petty spite. My instincts had been entirely correct. I had saved my money, and more importantly, I had forced the truth out into the light. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when the doorbell finally rang. I looked through the peephole. David stood on the porch alone. He wasn't wearing a jacket, and his shoulders were slumped, rain soaking into his button-down shirt. I unlatched the chain and opened the door. "Mom," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Come inside, David. You're tracking water." I noted, stepping back. He walked into the foyer, hovering awkwardly on the mat. He looked around the quiet house, his eyes lingering on the stairs leading up to the now empty spare bedroom. He looked exhausted, older. "Jessica left," he said flatly. "She moved back in with her sister." I handed him a small towel from the hall closet. "Dry off." He took it, gripping the fabric tightly. "I saw her credit reports, Mom. The debt. The lies about the joint account. When I told her I couldn't get a loan for the wedding, she lost her mind. She told me I was useless if I couldn't provide the lifestyle she deserved." He looked up, his eyes red. "You knew, didn't you? That's why you canceled everything." "I knew she was using my money for a car lease," I stated simply. "I didn't know about her private debt, but I knew she didn't respect me, and I knew you were letting it happen. That was enough for me." "I'm sorry," he whispered, a tear finally slipping down his cheek. "I was so stupid. I just wanted her to be happy, and I let her walk all over you to do it." "I'm so sorry I sent that text." I didn't rush forward to hug him. I didn't tell him everything was magically fine. Healing takes time, and consequences are a necessary part of growth. "You made a poor choice, David," I said gently. "But you are my son, and I love you. You are always welcome in my home." I paused. "Provided you leave the drama at the door." He nodded, wiping his face. "I can do that." November 12th came and went without a wedding. Instead of sitting in an overpriced country club eating dry chicken and watching a woman who despised me pretend to smile for photos, I spent the day in my own home. I roasted a chicken, poured a glass of good red wine, and read a novel by the fireplace. David comes over for dinner every Sunday now. We don't talk about Jessica. We talk about his work, about books, about the future. He is slowly rebuilding his savings, and more importantly, he is rebuilding his own spine. He learned a hard lesson about boundaries, but he learned it before he signed a marriage certificate. Some of my friends at the country club whispered about me for a while. They thought I was harsh. They thought a mother should sacrifice everything for her child's happiness. But true love isn't enabling someone's ruin. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let the bridge burn, so they are forced to find a better path. I still have the $87,400 sitting safely in my savings account. I recently decided to use a portion of it to renovate my kitchen. I hired a contractor, picked out the materials myself, and kept the layout exactly the way I like it. I never did buy those uniform glass spice jars. I prefer my chaotic, mismatched pantry. It's practical, it's mine, and nobody reorganizes it without my permission. My home is quiet again. The locks hold firm. And when I sit by my window and look out at the neighborhood, the only thing I feel is peace. I didn't just save my money, I saved my dignity. And I have never once regretted the text I sent that day.